Hello and welcome to Dice Tabletop. My name is Chris, and in this episode we're going to be painting a Necron Cryptek / Technomancer. Excuse me in advance, I am probably going to be calling this a Technomancer throughout, but I'm probably going to switch in between. So as you can see, I've already built the two sub-assemblies here, and I've gone ahead and based this with a really simple blend of just sand and rocks. I've kept these separate so we can get at the back of the model and the cape as well. First thing I want to do is to glue the model to a little base. This is so I'm going to be able to hold it as we go around and paint the model. So with a little bit of super glue, glued that on, and that will break off easy now later on. So to prime it, we are going to be using Vallejo Surface Primer through an airbrush. So I am going to be applying a little bit of airbrush thinner to it. This is about a 7-3 mixture of surface primer to the thinner. So I mix that up in the cup, a little test spray to make sure it's all coming out okay. And then apply about 3 to 4 thin layers, making sure to get really even coverage over the whole model. Now that we've got the base coat down, the next thing we're going to be doing is applying a layer of Vallejo gun metal. This is going to be going over all parts of the model. Being Necron, every part of it is metal. We're also going to be making sure to capture, you can see that there's some, it looks like some broken off legs that the model is attached to there on the base. So we're going to make sure that we capture them as well with the airbrush. With the layer of gunmetal dried, next is to base out all of the gold parts on the model. I'm going to be using a really old Citadel, if you remember these red brushes, a really old Citadel layer brush here, and I'm also going to be using Gehenna's gold. So for the gold pieces I want on this is going to be all the scales on the sort of metal cloak that this Cryptek has. As well as that, we're going to be basing out some gold parts on the model itself. So this is going to be all around these hip plates of armor, the cowl around the head, as well as some parts on the face of the model. And as I was putting this gold down, I decided I want to do this little tabard in the middle gold, as well as this accent on the staff as well. With a second coat applied over the top, that was looking good. So I want to contrast the helmet of the model now against the rest of it, so I'm going to be using some Vallejo white and blocking in the helmet in between the gold pieces, putting 2 thin coats all over it, not worrying if I'm going into the recesses of the teeth at all, because the wash is going to pick those out later on. With that dried, we have now blocked in the 3 main colours that are going to be on this Necron. It's going to be nice and simple colour scheme. You can see that gold is really shining with the additional second layer on top of it. Next thing that we want to do now is apply a wash all over it. Now I'm going to be using AK Interactive's Winter Streaking Grime. I do have the highly coveted Streaking Grime, but that is reserved for special occasions. So what I'm going to be using, if you haven't used enamels before, the way that these work, they look a little bit daunting to start off with. We are going to be watering this down, making a little wash using it, spreading that all over the model, waiting for that to dry, and then coming back and sponging it off. What that is going to do is leave this wash in all of the recesses and then take it away from the highlight, and it's going to have a really nice gradient of dirty, dark recesses all the way to shiny, bright metal. So this wash that I made was actually a little bit too thin, so if you are following along, I don't recommend putting this much distilled mineral spirits into the wash. You do want it a little bit thicker, but I come back and top that up later on. The great thing about working with mineral spirit as a thinner is that you can really quickly flash it off with a hairdryer. Don't have the setting too hot, just a quick blast and you'll get it all nice and dry. Next I'm coming in with some white spirit. This is just some dirty white spirit that I have. This is specifically just used for this purpose, so I don't care about it being too clean or whatnot. Putting a little bit on my sponge there, dabbing off all of the excess, and then it is a matter of coming all over the model. Try not to press too hard, you can end up breaking bits off, you don't want that to be happening. Just come over all of your model and gently dab all of that excess off, dry it again, and you can see there we are starting to develop that dark tone in the recesses. As I mentioned though, that was not a good layer of coverage, so I've come back and put a thicker layer on. I'm doing the exact same method as you can before. As you can see, this is a lot darker, a lot richer now on the model. So I'm still going to flash that off again with a hairdryer, the same way that I have done before. Once that is a little bit dry, I'm coming back in, wetting that sponge with a little bit of white spirit, dabbing it all over the top, removing as much as I can, and that creates a much better, much more richer, deeper tone in this metal. With a quick little flash off with the hairdryer, that was all done, and I'm really liking now the tones that this is creating in the metal. I'm going for a really dark, dirty. My Necron theme is that they've risen up on a forest planet. Imagine the Necrons have just taken over Endor. I'll be doing a follow-up video later on showing how I then go adding all sort of vegetation effects to my models, but that'll be for a second video. With that done, now what we're going to need to do is go ahead and highlight all of these silver parts. Starting off with the gold, we're going back to the Gehenna's gold that we started off with. I'm using a flat brush here and gently running that up the scales to pick out all of the edges. I want a little bit of flickering. I don't want this to be a really neat effect to start off with. I want it to look like it's a little bit chipped and worn and aged. Doing the scales in the cloak was nice and quick. Next it was on to the Cryptek himself. So this is just a matter of dry brushing, picking out all of those edges to start off with. As I say, I want a nice little rough edge to it, make it look like it's worn and millions of years old. Dry brush complete, and that is really starting to come together. You can see the depth has been left in the gold, but we're really starting to pick out that shimmer on the top of it. So we've done the dry brush on the gold, next is to do it on the silver. It is the exact same principle. I'm using a Tamiya flat brush here. I should have actually done this the other way around. This is a smaller brush than the one I used for the gold. It would have been much better if I used this one for the gold instead, but hey ho. So I'm using a light Rune Fang silver. This is going to really help create some nice scratching effects and differentiate the high surface metal that is going to catch all the light as opposed to all the dark recesses that we've just put all the streaking grime into. So going all over the model, you can start to see there, it is applying that highlight really nice on all of the edges. Making sure to catch every little bit of metal that we see. Cape and back done, now it is just a simple matter of doing the exact same all over the Technomancer himself. There we have it. With that done, you can see now that the gold has got a nice little accent chippy effect to it, but it isn't too stark at the moment, and the metal has got a nice clean highlight over it, but again, it isn't too distracting from the actual dirt and grime that we've put into it. Now, next task is to go around and edge highlight all of this gold. Now, this is not a strength of mine at all, so it's great to be able to jump on a model like this and use it as a little practice experience. So we're going around the little tabard in the center, all of the hip armor, using the chin there, as well as there's a stripe on the top of the head. Making sure all of those are picked out. Next, it was a very long task of going over all of the scales on the cloak. We went around every little part, as you can see there, making sure also to go around the little notch that's cut out in the center, as you can see just by there. This was a matter of taking my time, and then once that was done, I'm just running Nuln Oil into that little gap in the center just to redefine it. And there we have it, that is the cloak complete, and I'm pretty sure the gold are complete now across all of the model as well. All we need to do is run some little Nuln Oil into all the recesses on places like the tabard, into the chin as well, just to really help pick out that detail. Alright, with that done, next we want to move on and add a little bit of light back into the head. So what I did is I watered down the Vallejo white and I stippled this on, building it up in layers, letting it blend with the dark tone in the background. So it's a nice gradual transition from the dark dirt up to a more brighter white, making sure not to go over the teeth so that they're still nice and defined. Okay, time to start work on something that I'm really enjoying now. It is the glowing effect. This has been my own little method. I'm starting off with an AK Interactive dark green here, going over everything that I want to be glowing, giving it a really nice, even 2-layer coverage. That's going to give me my starting point. There's quite a lot of things that I'm going to want to be glowing on this model. So as you can see, there's an orb in the center of the waist, his eyes. I want the entire staff, the top and the bottom, to be glowing, as well as on the back of the cape there was that big glowing orb in the center of the back, 2 pieces on either shoulders. With that done, the next thing we're going to do is come back in with AK Interactive Luminous Green. I'm applying this into the airbrush, and be careful if you put this in your airbrush. Certain paints, for some reason, they just stick in there and take absolutely ages to come out when they clean. And I'm also taking the end off and exposing the needle. This enables me now to get a nice bit of a tighter control when I'm spraying this. So in order to get the base of that glowing effect, I want to leave as much dark close to the center of the staff as possible and as much light on the extremities of the blade, getting a nice clean transition from that dark to light. Building this up over several layers, being careful just to make sure that we're not really decreasing that darkness and making it too bright in the center. That is the biggest thing that you really want to be watching out for if you're using the airbrush to help you make glow effects. Now, my airbrush isn't the best. I am using a Fender. If you have looked online and you've seen the basic kit where you just get a compressor and an airbrush that's around about £100, that's the one that I'm using here. It's a fantastic tool. It has done me well for a very long time. I am looking forward to upgrading a little bit later on and seeing what the true difference is in this level of control when you buy a more expensive airbrush, but you don't need it. As you can see here, I'm making really easy work of this. It is not difficult at all. I'm able to get the fine control that I need just to get these glowing effects done. Before we can move on to the final stage of really making this pop and glow, I need to edge highlight all of these staff. Again, this is not a strength of mine, so it's really great to be able to work on a model like this and just use it to improve my skill. I think I swapped between a couple of different brushes, just trying to find out which one worked for me, trying out different consistencies of the white paint as well. But after a while, I got what I was quite pleased with. So what we're going to do now to make this glow is come back in with Vallejo yellow ink. We're going to put that over the top. It doesn't come across too well on camera with some of these, but that saturation over the green, it really brings it to life, and it really makes it like it really makes it look like it's glowing. As you can see on the staff, this is a much closer visualization of how it looks in person on the smaller orbs. Now, the benefit of using ink over a wash is that it stains the color underneath but leaves it there. So by edge highlighting with white and then putting the yellow over the top of it, as you can see there, it creates that really nice yellow highlight all around the edges. Once that has been done, I then thin down the game ink, the yellow game ink, on my wet palette, and I come around and I run that all around the outside now. That is just going to soften it down and create that nice little glowing effect around that center of light. The next thing that I wanted to do is add a little bit of sort of texture and depth and interest into some of these glowing orbs. So I just got the Vallejo white, thinned that down and took as much off of my brush as I could, and then stippled that over a few of the orbs. This just made it look like there was something going on inside it, like it was moving and twisting and alive. I then put the yellow ink back on top of that white, and that just helped bring it out and give it that extra sort of layer and depth to it. So through applying that ink, what we have done is we've sort of dropped that in all of the now recesses on the staff. So it doesn't really look as good. We now want to bring all that depth back into those recesses. So I'm going back in and I'm using a dark green ink and just running this into all of the recesses that I can, making sure not to touch the edge highlights on the side. And if I did, came back in there and just touched that up with a little bit of white, applied the yellow back over the top, and it was completely fixed. So, staff finished. Next thing we need to do is now put this model together. The model came really nicely away from the base. I only put a little bit of super glue on. You don't need much just to hold these things in place. So then it was to top up and paint that to match the rest of the model. So we used the gunmetal as a base, came back in then with the winter streaking grime, dabbed that off, and as you can see, that blended straight back in with the other foot. So with the super glue, popped that on where the Technomancer attaches to his cape, pushed it in, and there we have it. I'm pretty pleased with how this is turning out. As you can see there, the glowing effect is starting to come together really well. All of that metal is nice and shiny, but still has that dark, crusty richness to it. As well as the metal on the body, you can see there it's got a nice transition to some silver all the way into the dark, grotty recesses. I also applied some of the yellow ink to the foot so it looked like it was capturing the glow of that orb underneath it. Now it is on to painting the base. I've got a very unique way that I do my basing if I want a mud effect, and I want to show you this. I use 4 different types of craft paint. This is a black, a brown, a yellow ochre, and a white as well. What I do is I put a few light dabs of white all the way around. Then I'll come back in with the yellow ochre, blend them a bit, but not fully. Then I'll come in with the umber on top, blend them in, and then I'll bring the black in on top. What I am doing is I'm wet blending all of these colors together on the base. It creates a really nice natural transition between a light and a dark tone. If you were to go out and have a look around and really study mud, should you ever really want to do that, you'll see that there are quite a lot of natural but very subtle changes within the color. So what we want to do is capture those. This is going to be predominantly covered anyway by a base, but when this dries, you'll see here in a moment that it really, oh there we are, now it's dried. It really has that nice natural element to it, and there's a good tonal range, keeping it nice and visually interesting. Alright, with the mud complete, next we need to do is paint the rocks. Starting off with a medium sea grey and just a small little brush that I can use just to apply a light dry brush all over the top. This is only a simple dry brush. We still want to leave a lot of that muddy, dirty effect in the base of the rock. That's going to act as the shade and make it blend into the base and make it look like it's belonging, you know, in the right scenery. And then once that is dried, we come back over the top with Army Painter's Spaceship Exterior. Just a little edge highlight just to really pick out everything, nothing too crazy. And as you can see, you've got the tonal depth there in the rocks, and they still look like they belong on the base and they're not sticking out of place. Now that we've finished painting the base, next is the fun bit, and I want, as I said, my Necrons to be living in like a forest Endor type environment. They've been asleep under the surface for millions of years and now they've woken up. Eventually they're all going to be covered in overgrowth and whatnot, but I'll add that in later on. So what I am doing is I've just got a whole different series of, I think it's a real moss mix. I've got some artificial grass that's going on in here right now. After that then I've also got some dirt little leafy offcuts. This was from a texturing pack that I was given by my girlfriend. So I've mixed all of those up together. From here we can go ahead now and just cover the entire base in PVA glue. So I just use the Army Painter's basing glue. Any PVA glue will do. Make sure you get a nice good even coverage there. And then once that is done, just sprinkle your base material all over the glue. Get it all over there. Make sure you don't leave any part of glue exposing there. And if you do need to, come back in, touch up any little bits I needed to do on the edge there, just where my fingers had rubbed it off. Make sure that you've got a nice even coverage of all of that, tapping it off as you go. Just build it up, build it up, build it up. And then you'll have something that looks like this at the end of it, and I'm quite happy with the way that this is turning out. What I do need to do, however, is, as you can see, I left some sand on the base of what the Necron is attached to because I wanted some moss effects to be growing. So I just applied a dark green to start off with, sorry, a medium green to start off with, then came back in with a luminous green, mixed those two then just to get sort of the mid to the high tone, dry brushed that over and built that up in a few layers. And as you can see, that looks a lot more natural and ties that back into the base. It's still not looking quite overgrown enough for me, so I've come back, I've got some of these little grass tufts, so just mixing up a variety of different colours. I don't want it looking too distracting and taking away from the model, but just to add a little bit of height to it, this is going to bring just a little bit more visual interest into the base and really make it look like it's living in that overgrown world. With that base complete, next it is time to put a black rim on it, and thank you very much to the person who pointed out in the last video that I should have used a graveyard bony earth colour for my beast lord. Colour blindness is strong, unfortunately, with me. And there we have it, the Technomancer is done. Let me know what you think. I really enjoyed painting this. It was a good little challenge for me. Coal of edge highlights, bringing in some existing techniques that I use and mixing them up with some new ones as well. It was also a good opportunity to show off a couple of little different techniques that I use. Let me know whether or not you think my way of basing is any good. I'd be interested to know how you guys do it. So, all that is left for me to say now is thank you ever so much, as always, for watching these videos. I really enjoy your enthusiasm and engaging with this content. Thank you so much. So, as always, if you do like it, remember to subscribe, like down below, as well as comment. And I'll see you soon.